all, it's a great pleasure to share some thoughts with you, and if I can do that only remotely, but the topic of how we can better leverage the potential of new technologies in education, I think, is one which should give us all sleepless nights, because we're simply not doing well enough around this. I mean, the challenges confronting all of us are you may have recalled this cover from The Economist. I think it was in 2014, basically showing us that about half of the jobs, we know them, could now be done through digital technologies. And the dilemma for educators is that the things to teach, to test, are precisely the things that are now also easy to automate, digitize, or outsource. Levy and Richard Murnane have shown that quite impressively when they actually talk about the change in the demand for skills. You can see there's been a decline in the demand for manual skills. Now that's basically the factories becoming automated. But in fact, the steepest decline in the demand for skills isn't anymore in the manual sector. It is in what we call routine skills. Exactly the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test. It's about the reproduction of subject matter content. This in the demand for non-routine analytic skills. Now that's not about reproducing what you know, but creatively extrapolating from what you know, using and applying your knowledge in novel settings, and interestingly, intellectual skills. University, collaborate, compete, connect, very, very important in labor demand. And again, that's something where technology can be such a huge force, connecting learners, reshaping learning environments, and so on. So quite significant shifts in demand for skills. And the patterns behind that are not actually very surprising. Robotics, taking over whole factories, is something that we'll all be familiar with. But actually, the best example is this. You have a car that can drive through the dense traffic of any large city, an accident without human intervention. That's really what's changing reality around us. What is this going to do to millions of lorry drivers, taxi drivers? Those kinds of workplaces are now subject to automation. It's about augmented reality. The world's most advanced knowledge in real time, anything that you do. And then that the world no longer rewards people just for what they know. No. Google's everything. The world rewards people now for what they can do with what they know. That's because a big differentiator. This is going to do to vocational training, when in the past we taught people long sequences of steps of what they need to do. Now, you can actually get that information to people at any point in time. You can just get that information. Lots of things that are in the pipeline that anticipate, talk about education and technology. Scholars have once described this as a race between technology and education. Like this, in the past, neither technology nor education made it big for the majority of people. If you to the time before the Industrial Revolution, very few people were affected deeply by either education or technology. Came the Industrial Revolution, and everything, technology racing ahead of people, and while a few benefited from this in the short term, it actually caused a huge amount of social pain that we actually can't imagine today anymore. The kind of social security systems that we do have today. But public policy responded to this. Now, that was the time when we introduced universal public schooling. It got skills ahead of technology, and we saw centuries of prosperity. Honest, at least that's what our PISA data suggests. Over the last decade, we've seen actually very, very little progress in education. Maybe the same, getting more people into school, more people to graduate. But if you think about actual changes in the quality of learning outcomes and relative learning outcomes, very little of that. The digital revolution that changes again everything, gets technology again ahead of people, and if we do not succeed to change education, we will see again huge amounts of social pain. So the question we have to confront is how we can once again move education ahead of technology. Huge is confronting us, and why the kind of industrial revolution was a step change. Today, it's going to be an ongoing sort of development. At least that's what most people predict. What does this mean for education? The first is, as I already mentioned, big changes in the demand for skills. The world becomes more people, and also companies need better forms of coordination, being able to collaborate, compete, connect. Of skills are more and more important. Schools are typically very good in breaking big problems into smaller ones and then train people to solve those smaller problems. So that's when you look at textbooks in school, that's what they're very good at. But education today comes from people who can look at worlds through different perspectives, different lenses, who can integrate different fields of knowledge, who can think like a scientist, but also think like an historian, who can basically design thinkers. And they used to divide the world between generalists and specialists. Generalists know very little about a lot, specialists know a lot about very little, and neither of that is making you successful these days. For you to have the capacity to become very quickly in a new field of study, to develop expert skills in new fields, changes in skill demand, and you can actually make this a lot more complex. When you kind of character qualities, or some call them social and emotional skills, fairness, integrity, character, and awareness, or aggregate level, resilience, adaptability, curiosity, initiative. These are ones that actually we needed just for a smaller league. You go sort of to leading private schools around the world, in Britain, for example, these independent private schools. Everybody wants to get the very elite schools. The differentiator is not that teach a little bit more math or a little bit more history. The differentiator are those kinds of character qualities. And it's so much better in getting employment. It's not just, better access to social networks. That's the common hypothesis. No, it's also about having those kinds of character qualities. The economy expects from us not to teach, be taught something, but to develop this kind of action skills that help us, navigate through an increasingly complex, volatile, and uncertain world. So when we come into this, first of all, technology can amplify innovative teaching. We learn from a textbook that was designed, 2 years ago, maybe even longer, when they can have access to the world's most advanced educational content in more months, with time constraints, with no space constraints. Technology, actually, that's the magic of technology today, that you have all the world's knowledge at your fingertips if you can access internet. That makes it so much more challenging. In the past, you could say, well, if you didn't know the answer to a question, your teacher could tell you, well, in an encyclopedia, and you can trust the answer to be right, and you find it. Well, Google or Weibo, wherever, and you find 27,000 answers to your question. It tells you what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's not true. So actually managing that content, that's what technology skills, what digital literacy really is about. With pedagogies, with learners as active participants. If you visit Singapore's future schools, it's a great example. You have 40 students in the classroom. It looks very complex, but as a teacher, you can look into the mind of every student in this class. You know what your students are doing because you have this window into students learning and new pedagogies, collaborative learning, social learning. They all say something about social learning, but at the end of the school year, they test students with an individual exam. We're not getting very far in this, but technology is supporting new pedagogies that make us active participants. Creation. Move highly industrial work organization and education to a more professional work organization. Opportunities here now. One of us recently in Shanghai that really impressed me was that they have a simple digital platform where teachers can upload their lesson plans. Now you think, wow, anybody can do that. Yeah, but the trick in Shanghai is that the more teachers upload your lessons, comment on your lessons, criticize your lessons, improve lessons, the more status you obtain in the system in Shanghai. And yeah, your principal will not just ask you, how well did you teach your own children? No, also ask you, what impact did you make on the education system in our province? So networks for knowledge creation, feedback. And at the moment we treat learning and testing as two different ends. Many people are against testing because they're saying, well, that's taking time away from learning, teaching, and so on. Well, the future is about integrating the process of teaching and learning and testing, where teachers maybe other instant feedback about the consequences of the learning, and so on. There's huge potential in all of this. Now, if you think about the pedagogical side in a little bit more, you can look at experiential learning. Many children never will get the chance to go into a laboratory or kind of environment that is not school-based. And what we can do with technology actually is share those kinds of experiences. Habits, experimentation, about acquiring biology or physics knowledge or chemistry knowledge. No, it's about knowing what an experiment is, what is an hypothesis, what is it about drawing evidence-based conclusions. Very cooperative learning, I mentioned already, interactive, metacognitive pedagogies. Now again, understanding how I learn, accessing my own learning strategies. That's the most crucial piece of education that's going to help me later advance my career. Again, crucially important. So technology. Internet at home, you can basically, if you come from a wealthy social background, that's the green triangle, you're pretty fine. I mean, with the exception of countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and Peru, Mexico, and so on. Most countries, the wealthy kids actually do have pretty good technological access to technology. If you come from the bottom quarter in terms of social context, in many countries, it looks a lot less good. Even in the United States, a wealthy country, I can see it's about 20% of those children who do not have access to digital technologies. Japan, they have technology doing really well for the privileged kids, but actually the disadvantaged kids actually are pretty much behind. So yes, access to technology at home is improving, but there are still big gaps. What does it say? That schools need to redouble their efforts in the technological gap. How do students spend online? That was actually a very interesting question that we asked ourselves. We surveyed 15-year-olds, and this is what we found. The blue bar is the time that students spend during weekdays outside the school, during weekends at school, weekdays at school. That's the red part. So you can see basically here what the time invested in school in most countries is still sort of the minority of the part. And then during weekdays, students spend more. We talk about in most countries roughly about a couple of hours that students spend online. And obviously the goal should be to make that time as productive as we can. It's not a negligible share of time that students invest in the learning at school, but more importantly, outside school. And my message is, this thinking of learning at school and learning at home has become natural for us. But we should sort of try to get rid of this and think about, learning an integrated process that takes place, at home, the office, at school, in multiple settings. And we should see how we can build synergies, better synergies across kinds of settings. News in terms of equipping schools with better technologies. This shows you the progress that was made between 2003 and 2012 in the quality of schools' education resources, which includes computers. And you can see in most countries seeing schools better. In Turkey, Poland, Uruguay, Russia, other countries less, and a few countries where things didn't change, like the United States. It doesn't mean that things are badly, but simply in 2003, the United States already had quite well-developed kind of infrastructure. Again, in most, we have seen progress. How effectively is technology used at school? So, of course, the next question. You can put computers into schools, but the key question is, are we leveraging them well? With this, we've constructed an index of technology use at school, and things look like this. The OECD, some countries better, some countries too well. Denmark, Norway, Australia, the Netherlands come out really, really well on that. Basically, a highly intensive technology use. Japan, Korea, but also Shanghai and China, surprisingly limited technology use at school. In between, you have sort of a lot of variability on this. But it is certainly a dimension where countries vary by a large margin. Intensity of technology use in the classroom. And it's the measure that we have on this, so it's really interesting. We're going to repeat that measure by the end of the year. We're going to have an update on this so we can see changes. That's all. There's technology in classrooms. Schools are using it more intensively. There's been a lot of investment in teacher training. But this is how the outcomes look. Look interesting. Of technology use, if you are sort of between 0 and 1 on the index, you use email at school at least once a month, you browse the internet for schoolwork at least once a week, and so on. So it's moderate use. And if between 1 and 2, then you browse the internet for school almost every day, and so on. You use it sort of more on a frequent basis. The average. And I think findings that we had in this study that basically you can see if that is the OECD average, the highest score is already below the current level of intensity. In that for every good example of technology used in school, you actually find about 4 or 5 examples that are bad ones. As you get puzzled, you think about is it an issue of technology, and then of course you start to think about how you're using it. And if in the classroom you have students who are just sitting there and pasting stuff from Google, obviously they're getting worse results than if they were taught in a very traditional way. So it's not so far-fetched, but what it tells us in sum is that we haven't become very good in leveraging the potential of technology. We added technology to a very traditional mix of pedagogies and instructional settings, and hasn't been terribly successful. Now, while that is the curve on average across countries, does it better in some countries than others? Yes. And very few examples, maybe Australia, maybe Singapore, but in the majority of countries, it looks like this, where technology intensity isn't related positively to better digital skills. And I'm not talking about mathematics, where the curve is actually more, but even when it comes to digital skills, because again, digital skills are not primarily about technology. They're the conceptual skills that underline the effective use of digital technologies. And I think about reading. Text is about building a mental representation of complex information structures of you only see a small part in front of you. Different from traditional reading, where you just read linearly through a text that is prefabricated. Literacy is not about extracting information, about constructing information. So the kind of intellectual capabilities that are involved are different ones. We haven't really become very good in developing them. Then the teachers. When 21st century pedagogies, most teachers in most countries we have what I would say is a highly constructivist approach to teaching. So say, my role as a teacher is to facilitate students' own inquiry. Students should be allowed to think to solutions to practical problems themselves before the teacher shows them how they are solved. That's the exceptions in most countries. The reality in classroom, the flip side is that actually the kind of that you foster that kind of constructivist approach to teaching are actually quite rare. For instance, use technology for projects or classwork. That's in less than 40% of the cases, frequently in all or nearly all lessons. Opens work on projects that require at least one week to complete, the kind of project-based learning that we all talk about. Reality is actually quite rare for this to happen. Students in small groups to come up with a joint solution to a problem or task. Again, collaborative learning, so kind of instructional environments. You share the idea that it's a good thing to do. It just doesn't happen in the average classroom. So I call the implementation gap. Now, not that teachers don't understand what good pedagogy is, at least theoretically. There's quite strong understanding across countries, across teachers. But the reality of classroom practice is so far removed from this. And if that happens in any profession, we've got ourselves, what work organization or learning environments actually create that implementation gap. And again, you see not so much variation across countries. What development? Yeah, you can see that. Actually, technology skills always come up very, very high, as do technologies in the workplace. Teachers feel that they have shortcomings there. But I think often we attribute too much to this. It's equally important to invest in the work organization, work environment, than just, upgrading teachers' individual skills. Because when you actually measure the skills of teachers, the teacher skills and readiness to use information and communication technologies for problem solving, you see in some of the countries that didn't come out so well, look at it, quite well prepared. They do a test, technology skills are actually really, really good, but something seems so, obstructing that on a academic base in the classroom. So there's lots of things that we can do. There's the potential of technology. I want to highlight 4 dimensions, and with that I will conclude my presentation. The first, thinking creatively of how we can group educators to get collaborative planning, shared professional development, or new pedagogical options. Now, I made the example from Shanghai, thinking about ways of how we can connect educators in new ways through technology. And the East Asians are a really interesting example. They're not technology very intensively in the classroom, but they're very intensively to connect learners, to connect teachers, to connect parents with teachers. And teachers are connected with all of their parents through these kind of Facebook-type chat groups. They call it QQ groups. So reaping educators, linking educators, building communities of practice, very, very important part. Regrouping learners, of course, to give learners a better sense of belonging and student engagement. So much more interesting to work in a digital environment and to work with paper and pencil. Students have different abilities, different strengths, different backgrounds, to widen pedagogical options. A lot of things that we can do to regroup learners, to schedule learning, making learning not a place but an activity, integrating in-school, out-of-school learning, accelerating learning, and so on. And the hardest part is, of course, widen the pedagogical repertoire. That's something where I think the kind of concepts and ideas are insufficiently developed. But on the other 3 dimensions, there we could be doing a lot of things today if we sort of made this a priority and had the right strategy. So overall, on the technological front, we've seen a lot of progress. On implementation, there's a lot of room for further progress. With that, I want to stop so that we have enough time for discussion. Thank you very much.
Are you able to do questions with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
If anybody has some questions, we have the microphone set up at the front of the room. Does anybody have any questions for Andreas? Get back here.
Of what you presented, and there's some key things that are totally in alignment. I'm a high school teacher. I teach all of my classes based on project-based learning. Kids are working on a semester-long project, and I'm finding that making transition in, I teach computer science, but making that transition to that kind of environment for people who teach math and sciences seems to be a lot more challenging. Do you see a way that we're going to be able to catch education up quickly enough? Technology is changing so dramatically quickly that if we don't change pretty quickly, I think we're in danger of just going totally off the rails and not being all what the students need to adapt to the current world. What steps do you see that we can take to kind of ratchet up the speed with which education is changing?
I think it's a very good question. In fact, I think the United States provides really good examples. Think about High-Tech High. Project-based learning is systemic there. Every teacher does it. It's very hard to do that as an individual teacher. It's very hard to do it in a subject. You need to change the culture of schooling, and that is a leadership task. But there are some countries that have become very, very good at changing pedagogy. So Singapore is a great example where you can see sort of pedagogy changing on a systemic basis, so that teachers don't feel alone, that teachers feel well supported. In Singapore, you get 100 hours invested in teachers every year in terms of professional development. In East Asia, teachers would typically teach less. They teach classes, but they teach less and have more time to connect with other teachers, to build sort of lesson plans, to have more space to share experiences. And I think things are really important. You do it as a single teacher, very, very hard to do. Doing it at a single school equally, you need to sort of take a kind of systemic approach to this to change the work organization and culture of this. But again, there are good examples. There are many good examples of individual schools in the United States, and there are countries that are just much, much further ahead on this.
Do we have other questions?
Good morning, Andreas. It's Heidi Sue. I'm a classroom teacher and now at the ministry. I really appreciated your talk this morning. My school that I have just come from, the teachers understand we need change. They get that piece. Their biggest struggle is around timetabling. What schedule of the school day look like? I'm just wondering what are some interesting models that you've seen in your travels or your studies of how different places have reinvented the schedule.
I think the question as well, and the United States actually stands out in the sense that teachers have very little time for other things than teaching. Is that, of course, student-staff ratios are not so bad. An answer is that work teachers is used quite differently in the US and in other countries. The relatively small sizes have driven out a lot of opportunities for teachers to do other things than teaching. I give you an example. China. Now teachers have a class of 50 students, but they only teach about 12, 13, 14 hours. They have a lot of time to work on collective lesson planning, on lesson evaluation. You would typically observe at least one lesson per week of another teacher. You would typically participate at least once per month in a teacher collaboration or competition in the province. So you are constantly embedded in sharing professional practice. Typically, Singapore is maybe even better example, the professional learning communities. So the time that teachers can devote to collective professional development is a very important part of the agenda. And one of the things that the United States has really lost in the effort to make classes smaller is because, spending is always limited, is to try out the things that are directly related to classroom practice, but they are, in fact, very, very important parts. You can go to Japan, an extreme. Japanese teacher, you are cleaning the classroom with your students at the end of the school day, and that is actually not, because they have no room cleaners, but it's part of the pedagogical mission. This is our school. We are working on this. We are responsible, collectively responsible for our environment. And I think you have a completely different relationship with your students. Or, as a Japanese teacher, you'd spend about 12 to 16 hours per week outside the classroom working with individual students or groups of students. In Europe, spends 30% of instruction time outside the classroom setting. So there are plenty of opportunities for teachers to build social, emotional relationships with their students. And I think that's got lost in the United States due to the efforts, to make schools more factories where teachers do very little beyond teaching.
Somebody asked via the app. Somebody asked, what did you mean by we must move education ahead of technology?
Education, when I was actually talking about the nature of the skills that you should value in education. We know, for example, today that routine cognitive skills are losing in importance. We shouldn't spend time on teaching students multiple choice type knowledge reproduction. We should spend our time on helping students, to access, manage, integrate, evaluate, reflect on knowledge. So sort of moving ahead the curve. We talk about, the decline in the importance of individual skills, the increase in the importance of social skills. We create more collaborative learning experiences for students, more project-based learning experiences where students can get ahead of the demands that are placed on them by technology. Now, otherwise, the most worrying part that we find today is that we have university graduates looking for jobs, and at the very time employers telling us they can't find the people with skills they need. And to close that gap, we really need to think hard about, we need to be better in anticipating the evolution of skill demand, not just in the labor market, but also more broadly in our societies.